How do you fill in the gaps while advancing the plot? Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. Kitty the cat, I'm sorry, that's just a humorous name, asked me a question or made a comment on one of my videos and said that they're a new DM and they've got the main storyline down. Their words were from A to Z, but they're having a bit of a problem with the minor story and how to escalate the plot naturally. I'm going to make a comment which may or may not be a bit controversial. I think role-playing games are actually a form of literature. They're an interactive, verbal, and with some written part of literature. And so one approach to looking at this is to look at how things are handled from literature. So I was looking around and I found an article that basically is 5 ways to use a setting to advance a plot. And this is for writers, but it applies also to anybody working if you're doing your own homebrew campaign. And so the author of this, and I'll put the link down in the description, says there are 7 setting details that you should include in your, well, in this case, they're saying a novel, but I think this is very applicable to your role-playing campaign. Some of them are going to fall out naturally, but let's go through them. So the first the first detail you need to include is, where does the story take place? Now, if you're planning a full storyline, where does the story take place? Is it all in one location? And perhaps you don't want it all in one location. You want it to move from point A to point B to point C to point D, so that the players have to go on a journey. I'll get into some other reasons for that in a minute. But the place itself gives some color and texture to what's going on, because this goes into the other things that the author described, saying that you want to, how is the culture? How does it change? If your characters have to, they have to go on a mighty quest. Let's take a look at the Lord of the Rings. You start off in the Shire, and they have to go to Rivendell, and then they have to go to Helm's Deep, and you have all these places, each with a different setting, with different cultures, with different things. This gives you an opportunity to introduce in this, which adds more color to your campaign. The different places add color in your campaign. And then this one sort of falls out of the overall setting. What era does your story happen? If we're in a fantasy game, if we're doing Dungeons and Dragons, we know what era. However, you can also take a look at what era, if you're building up a world, what era is the world in. Now, in the world of Tiglath, I think I'd set it up as the 4th Age. And I described what were the major things that had happened through history and why this was the 4th Age. And it's always interesting so that you know what are these major events in the past which changed the age, and those are the major world-changing events. So you want to have an idea. This gives you the background of your world, of what's happening in your world building. So what era are they in? Now, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you've got your swords and your shields and your armor and your magic and so on. That's the era that it sets up, but is it always been that way? This feeds into the geography of that. I always say the geography of your world can introduce plots and stories and what's going on. So is the geography becomes a character as they move from place to place. Is the geography the same? There's a very different feel when you're out on the desert versus when you're in a port city. So that's those are the geography effects, how the plot. Well, we'll get into the plot in a minute. So then, the article, this author said, there are things. These includes pets, possessions, items in shops, landmarks, roadsides, anything your character is able to touch, see, hear, smell, or taste. I like the one about see, smell, and taste. For me, one way to introduce color to, I guess the phrase is color to your campaign, is to make the food different as you move from location to location. What are the local favorite dishes? How does this introduce to the characters? You know, when they go into the tavern, they're traveling from town to town, and they go into the tavern. What is on the menu if they're looking for food? Is it always the same? Does it vary? Are there local variations? Do they fix it slightly different? For example, let's say your character just is a carrots and potato person. They're vegetarian and they only eat carrots and potatoes. But there are many, many ways to cook carrots and potatoes, and there are different spices and herbs that could be added to the mixture. So just traveling from location to location, even with a fixed diet, fixed type of diet, you're saying I only want these things in my diet, there can be a wide variety. And you can run into the other question is how are the carrots and the potatoes preserved, and so on. And if you go open up, you know, that's how things are cooked, or are they pickles? I did a video on pickles and so on. So you have that. The other detail you can add is what time, particularly what time of year is this? Is this in the spring? Is this in the summer? Is this in the fall? Is this in the winter? That has it. And as your story progresses, time advances and can change the way the weather is and the way the colors are. You may go up into the mountains. I remember I grew up in Utah, and if you go up there in the late spring, early summer, the grass is green. It's green. The trees are have got all their leaves on them, and it's a very green environment, and it's very warm. I guess to me that's the feeling of it, the warm, even though it may not be that terribly cool depending upon your altitude. But then when it comes to winter, the trees have lost all their leaves and it's bleak and cold and windy, very different feel. And that's in the same location. So how is that affecting the characters? You see this in the Game of Thrones. You're seeing winter is coming, and how does that affect everything? And that fits into the weather. That's something you need to describe, is how the time of the season and the weather. Amanda Patterson, who is the person who wrote this article that I'm referencing, she said there are 5 things using the setting to advance or shift the plot. And so she gives some ideas about them. The first one is, she says, let's reveal something that was previously hidden. So as the characters are at a setting, you can reveal things that they may not have known. So even if you've got your plot completely, your storyline completely laid out, do the characters know all the details of the plot? And even if what you think they do, you can always add additional color. What do I mean by that? What happens is that you've got a bunch of NPCs. Now, the players are going to interact with NPCs along this, and if say their goal is to go and meet some big powerful NPC, they don't know all the details about this character. And as they're going along, they go, because these are the minor details about this character. They're not important to the plot of the story, but they add interest. For example, you find out that, the character that you're supposed to meet, that when they were a child, something happened, and they broke the little finger on their left hand, and though it was healed, it's got a funny crook in his left it's fully functional because it was healed, but he's got a funny crook and a scar on the left finger, on the little finger of his left hand. This is not a major plot point, but it adds color and adds texture and depth to the stories. It makes your NPCs come much more alive, much more vibrantly, because when you find out various things or some detail about their childhood, some childhood friend that they had and lost or whatever, these are things that you can introduce that makes the players much more interested in the adventure, in advancing the story. The other thing is you can, item 2, create an outside threat to the environment. You can do this with weather. A bad storm could prevent a character from achieving a goal. You can do this with religion. A cult may have set up headquarters in the area, forever changing the town. You can do this with technology. A technical error could shut down the electrical supply to the hotel. So you can add some outside event. For example, they're at some little town and suddenly the town has a well, and the well is drying up, or the water when they pull the water, it's suddenly a slightly different, there's a color to it. Before it was crystal clear and now it's a little cloudy. Why? This can add interest. This can add a whole entire side quests that may or may not be related to the main plot, but they add that, or they could be a side effect of the main plot, your main storyline. Is your main storyline affecting the world around it? And if so, what are the major and minor effects? Item number 3, remove possessions or pets. If a character loses something that, or has something stolen, it will affect the environment. The loss of the animal changes the setting completely. So what happens is this is something that you can do. Say the party is just going along fine, they're on their way, but they're using a horse-drawn cart, and the horse stumbles and falls and breaks its leg. Now you've got to find a new horse. This puts a whole interest in complications, which can advance the plot or hinder the plot or advance the characters. But this is the way you can add the color to the environment, because it's the journey to get there. The players don't, let's be completely clear, players don't want to solve an adventure in a campaign. They don't want to solve it in one setting. If you're playing one shot, okay, you do want to solve it, but that's the difference between a campaign and a one shot. If you're trying to establish a campaign with a larger overarching story, the players wanted to have the time to enjoy getting there. It's the journey that they're interested in. The idea that you'll be playing multiple sessions to continue the ongoing story. So adding hindrances along the way, you may think you're adding hindrances, but you're adding a richness to the story. And so you're not adding hindrances, you're giving the characters a way to have fun, to advance, to kill things, to do whatever. You're advancing the story, but you're adding the color along the way. And item number 5 is move your character into an alien environment. You can move your character out of her family home into a studio apartment, or she could simply take the wrong train home. So in essence, the characters, they're off on this journey and they go, how do I get from point A to point B? And somebody tells them, go this way, and the map that they've got is old, and they're following the map, and the terrain has changed. There's been a rock slide or a landslide, and it's changed the terrain a little bit, and they take the wrong path. Now, this is not an end of the plot or the end of the story, but now they've taken the wrong path that may go and get them there eventually. You know, you always have the old road and the new road. Do you take the old road or do you take the new road? Which one's shortest? And The ones that they think may be shortest actually may be the longer road because there are other problems along the way. So change the setting so that they're not as comfortable. They're used to one kind of environment. Change something that's very different. You look at the Lord of the Rings. They're going along, and then they're going up the mountains, and the weather has got so bad that they have to go through the mines of Moria. Now that is a very different change of environment. You were outside doing facing weather and climbing a mountain, and now you're deep in a dwarven environment that's been carved out and it's been taken over by goblins and Balrog and everything else, and it's a very different environment. So you've changed the setting because it's along the path. I'm going to put another link in the description. This is to what is called the basic plots in literature. And they are actually the basic plots that you can put into role-playing games. And there's a different argument about this. How many plots are there if you go studying through literature? If you've done anything of reading about writing, how many plots really are there? And the one that is sort of interesting that I kind of like is that there are only 7 basic plots. And the basic plots is the person versus nature, the person versus another person, the person versus the environment, the person versus machines or technology, a person versus the supernatural, the person versus themselves, or the person versus God or religion. So those are what are called the 7 basic plots. And the link also, I'll put in there, describes where somebody's broken it down into 20 or down into 36 separate plots. But if you just look at the basic 7 plots, what is going on as you're advancing your major storyline? You've got a major storyline, and you can decompose it into different subplots often if you've got a complex story. And is it one of these 7 plots? Is it your party against nature, or your party against another NPC or NPCs? Is it a party against the environment, or is it a party against the machines and technology? That's not as common in Dungeons and Dragons, but you can put that in there. Is it the party versus supernatural, which is in a D&D world, there's often very little different between the environment and the supernatural. And then there's a party against self, which is an interesting one. You can, this is where you can get into alignment. Where is the party, does the party have to do something that they normally would not want to do? And then there's the party against the religion or God. And that's another one, is that particularly if you've got characters who are, quote, good characters, is there something that they may not be fully comfortable with for their character doing, and that they have to accomplish the end goal? Do you want to add this? So you can flesh out all your campaign by adding additional color and adding sub-challenges along the way. And I put the links down in the description, and that these are links that are normally applied to literature, but they're good for a dungeon master to look at, or a game master, because they can teach you different approaches to adding interesting things to your adventures. You can add new color, new flavors to how the adventures work. So I hope I answered Kitty the Cat's question, and I'd like to hear your comments. How do you fill in the gaps? If you've outlined a major story arc, how do you continue to advance the plot? My example in the world of Tiglath is I don't. What do I mean by that is that the plot is so large and so complicated that the characters can go in very many different directions in the plot, that I prefer to have the cogs change with that. And so I'm not railroading them, but if you lay out the ideas, you can, whatever direction the characters want to go, you can add new and colorful features. And so hopefully some of this will be helpful to some of you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Am I rambling too much? Did you find any of this helpful? And what did you find helpful? How have you done this in the past? Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.